Autism Exchange, the show where two Aspies share the things they're obsessed with. I'm Forcewave.
And I'm HubPie, and Autism Exchanging is just another part of the life of the average Aspie.
You're goddamn right. So today we're talking about the third game in the Metal Gear series, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater.
And yes, you do eat tons of snakes in this game. Some range from being pretty tasty to disgusting. So the title does not lie, but there is a double meaning to it. No, not that kind of double meaning. This isn't the Ratchet & Clank marathon.
I was just about to say.
Yeah, if we ever talk about Ratchet & Clank, we'll have to make every fucking episode a euphemism in some way. But every fucking title in that game's franchise is a euphemism in some way.
Well, what I was saying was, all of Naked Steak's positive comments can apply to your opinion of pussy.
Yes, very much so.
Giggity.
Yeah. So, what makes Metal Gear Solid 3 special in this case for you?
Because this was my first proper introduction to the series.
So you started off by eating a ton of snakes. What an introduction.
Yes, and I enjoyed eating all these snakes.
He's bisexual, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep. So, here's how it happened. I always wanted to get into the Metal Gear series. Even though I was an Xbox 360 fanboy, there was something about Metal Gear Solid 4 and Hideo Kojima that, commanded respect from me, even back then.
Well, let me ask you a question. What was it about it that you had to give respect for?
Metal Gear Solid 4 was the only PlayStation 3 game for a long time that was worth giving a shit about.
Unless you were a Ratchet & Clank fan, but otherwise I get your point.
Sure, and the series had this long-standing legacy that Metal Gear Solid 4 was the conclusion of, and I'm very autistic about endings. I think they're the most important part of a story. You know, I was really big into Halo at the time, and Halo 3's marketing was finish the fight! So I always wanted to give Metal Gear Solid a chance. There's this used game store at the mall I would always go to, and it had the original jewel case copy of Metal Gear Solid 1. But I didn't have a PlayStation 1 memory card, so I couldn't save my data. So I waited until I got one, with the sole purpose of being able to play Metal Gear Solid 1. So I got it, then I came back to the used game store, and they didn't have Metal Gear Solid 1 anymore.
Aww.
So then later on, I went to EB Games. Remember when that was a thing?
There was Blockbuster and Hollywood Video and all that stuff.
Well, EB Games was like GameStop, but not GameStop.
I just thought of it as the Canadian GameStop.
Well, it eventually became GameStop all across America. So I tried to get a copy of Metal Gear Solid 2, but the guy wouldn't sell it to me because I was under 17.
Imagine how that would have started. Like if you started your Metal Gear journey with Metal Gear Solid 2.
Oh yeah, I dodged a bullet because I would have been even more lost than I already was.
Oh, dear Christ. I mean, I love Metal Gear Solid 2's story, but we'll talk about an advantage MGS3's story has over it when we talk about the story.
Right, and what's stupid is I went to a video store in the same mall, and they let me get the unrated DVD of Uwe Boll's Postal film without needing an ID or anything.
Well, you see, that's because it was unrated, so they can technically sell it to you.
But unrated is even worse. It's worse than rated R.
Yeah, I know, but to some people, it might as well be, well, it's not rated, so technically I can sell it to you.
And the funniest part is, it came with an unrated game. It came with Postal 2 for PC. But the cashier didn't give a shit. He just thought, this kid wants this weird movie, okay. I do have a soft spot for Uwe Boll's Postal, but that's a whole other topic.
Are we gonna have to do an Uwe Boll marathon?
Fuck no.
What, you don't want to watch House of the Dead?
We'll watch Postal, and we'll see if I still like it. I watched it when I was a teenager, so maybe the toilet humor has worn off on me. So eventually, a lot of young people today don't know this, there's these things called video rental stores.
I didn't really use video rental stores back in the day. I only really used them when they were going out. That's how I got my collection of the Simpsons DVDs, seasons 1 through 6 and 8.
My family loved video rental stores, but for some reason, we had a feud with Blockbuster, something about returning a movie at the wrong place, and so we got a bunch of late charges. So instead, we moved to Hollywood Video. So I was browsing the PlayStation 2 section, and that's when I found the original version of Metal Gear Solid 3, the one before they added the 3D over-the-shoulder camera. So I thought, okay, I heard this one's a prequel. This shouldn't be too hard to get into then. And so my thought was this is just going to be a typical military game, because that's how it was marketed. So the game starts with a lot of cutscenes and a lot of talking, and the boss was philosophizing about the pettiness of international politics. Yada yada fucking yada. Just let me slit some throats, bitch.
Okay, Darkside Phil.
So I play the game, I make it up to Sokolov. This is when I first introduced this little punk asshole named Ocelot. I fucking hated him.
What, you don't like Josh Keaton?
No, I did not like Josh Keaton meowing.
Man, his pre-Spider-Man days were fucking wild.
So then I get to the fucking bridge with Naked Snake escorting Sokolov, and then the boss is on the other side. And it's like, oh, okay, this seems tense. But then they get surrounded by fucking bees, and Sokolov gets captured by some weird Spider-Man. Not Spider-Man.
There's no hyphen, so therefore it's not Spider-Man.
Exactly. And then it turns out the bees were summoned by some guy wearing a balaclava who looks like he has a bunch of pimples all over him. And then there's this old guy whose eyes bulged out. And there's a big guy who summons electricity from his hands. And there's a ghost who was next to the boss for a little bit. I was like, what the fuck is this? What did I get myself into?
All the old school Metal Gear fans are like, first time?
I know, right?
God.
So then Operation Snake Eater starts, and suddenly the boss, who seemed like a very grounded character, is now wearing some weird, all-white Power Rangers outfit. And she's riding a horse in the middle of the jungle. And then Eva rides her bike up Ocelot's body 20 feet into the air, and then smashes and opens the gates that leads you to make further progress. And it's like, what? Huh?
I think back then you've bit more than you can chew.
I was used to games like Call of Duty back then. You know, I was an Xbox gamer back then.
Mm-hmm.
I always preferred Halo, but, you know, Metal Gear Solid looked like a military game, like Call of Duty. But then it, like, crushes me in the balls constantly with all this crazy shit. Now, I think a normal person would go like, okay, this game's too weird. I'm gonna return it and forget I ever rented it. But I was intrigued. I wanted to see how deep this rabbit hole went.
Your autism senses were tingling that day.
Yes, yes. So I kept digging, and digging, and digging, and by the time I got to the end of the rabbit hole, I was so fucking enamored by this game, its story, its atmosphere, and that fucking ending. Holy shit. I was like, okay, I have to do everything I can to play every other game in the series. So that's when I ordered Metal Gear Solid 1 off eBay, and in the meantime, I worked to find out how to play the MSX games on my computer through an emulator. I use this thing called Blue MSX. So back then, when I played Metal Gear 2, whenever I wanted to crawl, I had to press the space bar and another button at the same time. Because I didn't have access to Subsistence Disc 2, the most common re-release of MGS3 Subsistence was individual sellings of the MGS3 disc from the Essential Collection, which didn't have Disc 2, and thus didn't have the MSX games on it.
Well, it's a good thing I had the HD Collection, which had the MSX games in them already.
Yeah, the HD Collection was the first time I ever played the PS2 versions of the MSX games.
It was really weird when you had me start this series, just going to Metal Gear Solid 3. But not to play Metal Gear Solid 3, no, to play these older games that were in the menu. So I was like, when the hell am I going to get to this game I keep opening up? And now we're here to talk about it.
Yep, I've been hyping this up as the game where we find out why Big Boss doesn't like grown-ups. Because in Metal Gear 2, there's a war orphan who tells Solid Snake, "One-eyed uncle is like a father to us. He hates grown-ups." And the reason why isn't really elaborated on. Well, okay, in his speech he talks about how soldiers are abused and discarded by their governments, but we never really see what brought him to that state. And this is what Snake Eater sets out to explain. So, Hub, did you like it?
Yeah, I did. A lot. I don't know if I'd say I like this as much as Metal Gear Solid 2 on a story perspective. Granted, both these games have very different stories and they both go for very different things, so comparing the two is pretty fruitless. But I will say, on a gameplay perspective, this is my favorite game in the series so far.
What is it about the gameplay you find so compelling?
A lot of it has to do with the survival mechanics and the fact there's no radar in this game. So instead of using regular strategies like tranquilizing guards or just barely sneaking past them and moving on, you have to do that, but now you also have to be aware of the area around you, because for all you know, there could be a guard that can see you from further away that you didn't notice, or maybe you miscalculated or mistimed something that can cause you to get fucked up. I know I've had that happen a couple of times. I had this perfectly good plan figured out, and then there would be an unknown variable that I didn't account for. So then I had to say, fuck the plan, we have to improvise, which sums up about 95% of my experience with this franchise.
The Indiana Jones method.
Essentially.
I recall you had a lot of problems with CQC initially.
Yeah, I had to figure out how CQC worked, because I would often, in the beginning area of the game during the Virtuous mission, I would use that to practice CQC, because the way I think you described it kind of confused me a bit. So I had to listen to, I think it was Major Zero, explain the methods, and the boss had to explain it. And even then I had to kind of put that into practice. So it took me a bit to figure it out, but it's one of those things where it's encouraged that you practice it. Granted, do it in a safer area where there's not many guards. So during the beginning sections of the jungle. But once I was able to figure out how it worked, I actually used that to my advantage a lot, mainly by knocking out guards and sometimes throwing them. And this is the game that I primarily used the method of catching a guard and then them giving me supplies. And then I would just either trank them or just knock them out with CQC afterwards.
For context, before every Metal Gear game, I send Hub some tips and advice, just so you can get the most out of the gameplay and get some cool Easter eggs, which Metal Gear Solid 3 has a ton of. And the way I explained CQC might have been too verbose.
Yeah, in fact, the way you explained the survival mechanics actually intimidated me, because unlike the other games in the series, I was actually pretty intimidated going to Metal Gear Solid 3, because you were talking about the intricacies of CQC, but you also mentioned stuff like you have to hunt for your own food, and if you get a certain injury, you have to maintain yourself, and I just thought, holy shit, this game could be overwhelming. But then I played the game, and while CQC took me some time to get the hang of, the survival and cure mechanics did not, because I was able to get that shit down as soon as they explained it.
The thing about CQC is, yeah, you can explain it through text, but there's a world of difference between learning through reading and learning through doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to articulate precise movements for how to perform certain CQC actions. And when you lay it out, it does seem like a lot, but when you actually do it, and do it enough times where you memorize what the actions are, it's not that intimidating. I just made it look intimidating because I'm autistically verbose.
Bullshit, it was part of some elaborate plan on your part.
I do have plenty of those ongoing.
Yeah. I have no fucking doubt about that.
One of my three biggest concerns with any newcomer to the Metal Gear series is Metal Gear Solid 3's fucked controls, because Metal Gear Solid 3 was the bridge between classic Metal Gear, top-down, Celaton radar, one base, backtracking, stuff like that, and modern Metal Gear, where you have third-person aiming controls that you would expect from a modern third-person shooter. And one of the worst things about the original release of Snake Eater was the fixed fucking camera.
Yeah, because in the HD version, or I guess the subsistence version of Metal Gear Solid 3 added the free roaming camera option, which puts you further in the camera view and you can move the camera with the right analog stick. And I found this to be a pretty good way to help me see my surroundings in a closer way. However, this also came with its disadvantages, because there were a few times in the game where I would look at a guard, paint him for a target, try to knock him out with a trank or CQC, but I didn't notice another guard who was nearby, and then that would cause me to get caught. But when I used the fixed camera for some places, which you advised me to do at certain points, it allowed me to see my surroundings at a further view. So, in a weird way, I feel like both the fixed camera and the free roaming camera are equally as advantageous and disadvantageous, because what one lacks, the other one makes up for, I feel.
Yeah, like in the mountains, I think the fixed camera angle is very beneficial because the mountains are a lot more vertical in their design, which is when a fixed camera would be more beneficial. On the other hand, when you have these wide open spaces, guards can see a lot further, and your footsteps make noise now. The fixed camera angle made sense when areas were more confined, and guards could only see a few feet ahead of them. But mixing guards that can see further in wider open areas with a fixed camera just seems like a huge mismatch, which thankfully Kojima eventually acknowledged and corrected in the game's re-release. But apart from that, there's also the finicky CQC controls, like you had trouble discerning how hard you should press the circle button in order to hold a guard without slitting his throat.
Yeah, that's what caused me to kill a few guards unintentionally the first couple of times. Because I was trying to get the speak function to work, which in hindsight doesn't really help a whole lot. So if I had to get them up close, I would just knock them out. I wouldn't break their neck, I would just knock them out. But now I'm at the point where if I have a guard who's alone, I'm just gonna fucking ask him for resources and then knock him out.
And also, despite having more modernized AI, you're still stuck with the old Metal Gear Solid 2 control scheme in terms of aiming and shooting. And the sniper rifle especially, when you equip it, you stand completely still, and your only method of movement is to hold down R1, and then use L2 and R2 in order to move left and right, or stand on your tippy toes by holding both down. Which can be very frustrating during the sniper battle later on in the game.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So, with Metal Gear Solid 1, I feel no sympathy for people who can't get into that game. It's very basic, it's very simple. If you can't get into it, that's on you, you fucking zoomer. Metal Gear Solid 2, I can understand why people would have problems with that, again, because of the aiming controls. But it gradually trains you into these weird aiming and shooting controls.
It's all part of the S3 program.
Exactly. It socially engineers you into accepting these controls, and there's still the Celaton radar, so that helps with sneaking around enemies. Snake Eater, though, I am worried that the game may be too intimidating for newcomers.
That's why you had me play the games in order before this one.
Yeah.
Because I was able to get the base controls down, because they were the same as Metal Gear Solid 2's. It's just the CQC stuff was new.
So if Konami ever gets off their asses and does a re-release of all the canon Metal Gear games, okay, I don't expect them to do this, and honestly, I'd prefer they just port the HD collection, emulate MGS1, and then get Bluepoint to figure out how to untangle Metal Gear Solid 4's code off of the PS3, and get it on other fucking systems, finally. But I think it would be interesting if they got Metal Gear Solid 3DS, managed to adapt that to a regular controller and TV setup, and had the option to play that version of the game, because that game has Metal Gear Solid 4's controls, so it's a lot more accessible.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind the option. They could give you an option at the beginning, original or, I guess, arranged would be a nice example. So if you pick original, you get the original CQC controls, but then the arranged mode gives you, like, MGS4s, I guess.
It wouldn't really be an arranged mode, it would be like a modernized mode.
Ah, okay.
But again, at this point, I just want the bare minimum from Konami. Please, for the love of God, preserve these games. Don't remake them, don't make sequels, just re-release them.
And really, them doing the bare minimum would be considered a goddamn accomplishment.
Yeah, because they didn't do the bare minimum with Silent Hill.
If anything, they fucking destroyed 2 and 3.
Yeah. So now on to the bosses, which some people say that MGS3 has the best boss fights in the series. What's your opinion on that?
The only bosses I'd say are really worth that level of praise are the end and the boss. The rest are, for the most part, fine. Like, I didn't think the pain was very difficult. His fight was interesting. The fear I was a bit underwhelmed by, because the weird thing about the fear is that what I wanted out of the fear is what I got from the end, which was a boss fight that used the environment, and you had to go around and find the boss through the environment. And this made more sense with the fear because he had like a stealth camouflage prototype that was basically like the Predator, but it was confined to one space, and the boss fight kind of just became really a bit too basic for my liking. It reminded me too much of that one boss from Metal Gear 2. I forget his name, but he's the one where you have to chuck grenades at him, and that's it.
Red Blaster?
Yeah, where it was an interesting idea, especially when that room was filled with like wires you had to cut. But all you really had to do was just chuck grenades and you win.
Or, with the fear, you can just put on thermal goggles, stand in one spot, and shoot him until he dies.
I didn't have the thermal goggles, but he wasn't very hard to spot, even without them.
And a friend discovered this tactic. You could use the fake death pill. He comes over to your alleged dead body, and then turns around. Now from here you can do one of two options. The useful one and the hilarious one. The useful one is where you throw a stun grenade and then unload an assault rifle on the fear, and that'll get you a ton of stamina damage, allowing you to stun kill him and then get his camouflage. The hilarious one is where you equip the torch, inch your way behind him with the D-pad, and then angle the torch in a way that it lights a fire on his ass, and slowly kills him. And he never notices.
What a chump. I forgot to mention this about the pain, but the fact that he was essentially a living beehive was probably one of the most unsettling things I've seen of this franchise so far. Because halfway through the fight, this dude starts shooting out what are called bullet bees from his fucking mouth. And I'm just like, holy shit, this dude is a living beehive. Like, fuck. Shit's insane. I can't imagine what it must have been like for you, not knowing anything about the franchise until you played this game. You're just like, bruh, what the hell is this?
By the time Ocelot started killing all the bees by throwing his revolvers, I knew that any sense of realism and groundedness was long gone in this game.
Yeah, so the pain and the fear, I was okay with the pain. I was pretty disappointed by the fear. But then the disappointment became non-existent when I got to the end. Or as I like to call it, the boss that took me so long that I put you to sleep.
That's right! You were playing the game after midnight, my time, and I was like, man, I feel really tired. But at the same time, I really want to be there when Hub beats the end.
The end. Yeah, so the end took me a really long time because I didn't have thermal goggles. And the point of the boss fight initially had to give me a bit of grips to get used to because the end was a very different boss fight from the previous two because you don't fight him head on like you do with the other two. There's no, pattern that the end has compared to those two. It's essentially an environmental boss fight where the environment is more of an obstacle than the end himself. And I remember saying this a lot, but this is probably the most interesting boss fight I've ever played in any video game. Because there's no boss music, you're primarily looking for him the whole time, whether it be through the D-mic, to where you could hear his breathing, or snoring, or finding his footprints. And it took me a long time to do. It took me about an hour and a half, but I wasn't particularly frustrated by it. I was annoyed by how long it was taking me, but that's more just anxiety being like, shit, this is taking me a long time. I'm a fucking dumbass, aren't I?
No. Taking an hour or so to beat the end is common.
I was especially fucking worried when I was watching This Is How You Don't Play Metal Gear Solid 3 after I finished the game, and Phil was like, oh my god, this boss fight's so stupid, and every fucking chance he got to attack it when he found him, he fucking failed terribly. Whereas with me, I was able to be like, okay, I found him, and attacked him, and it worked.
There's a part of that playthrough where DSP's like, alright, watch this. And he takes out his sniper rifle. He never zooms in because the game doesn't explain how to zoom in my sniper rifle, even though it does.
You can call Sigget, and he can tell you how it works.
Or better yet, read the fucking weapon descriptions.
That too. I can't believe that motherfucker didn't know how to put on fucking suppressors.
Right. So he takes out his sniper rifle, doesn't zoom in, and he just keeps shooting, and he never lands a shot. Okay, he lands one shot at the very end, but he was hyping this up as, alright, watch this. I'm about to do what's called a pro gamer move. And he completely fucking fails.
Well, you see, that's because Phil is the complete opposite of a gamer pro. It was actually really distressing watching that compilation because I was like, oh my god, even if, I don't care if this is the first time, he is ignoring so much obvious shit that the game fucking tells you. I got anxiety every time I would see his health bar with, the fucking, red part through it, and I'm like, dude, fucking cure yourself. How are you not doing this?
It took him forever to realize that he had leeches on his body.
Oh my god. I realized that shit as soon as I noticed that my stamina bar was depleting faster than usual. It took me, a couple of minutes to realize why my stamina bar was going down faster than it normally did. How long did it take Phil to notice it?
Remember when the end was wheeled out on that annoying part with the water and the bridges?
Yeah?
That's how long it took. After the pain.
Holy shit, really?
Yeah.
Oh my god. I think it's also because people in the comments told him how that shit worked.
No, he found out completely by accident.
Oh my god.
He got bit by a spider, and so he went into the cure menu, and that's when he saw all the leeches around him. So getting poisoned by a spider actually saved Naked Snake from starvation.
We should use spiders as part of our new super soldier experiment. I'm thinking of calling it Amazing Fantasy. Then again, Spider-Man was already a work of fiction by the time of the events of the game begin. So, whatever. But yeah, I was actually not very frustrated with the end. I was more annoyed by how long it was taking me more than the actual boss fight itself, because eventually I just got lost in the atmosphere of the boss fight. Again, there's no music. None. It's just environmental noises, everyone's favorite fucking track from Super Smash Bros. Brawl. And I was actually kind of captivated by how someone could design a boss fight like that.
Only Kojima, man.
Yeah. However, that's not the only way you can defeat him. In fact, the other ways to defeat him really deprave him of his final wish.
For example, if you got a sniper rifle early, you can shoot the end before you even fight him, when he's resting on a wheelchair.
Yeah, I know which part you're talking about.
And if you do, he blows up, and the wheel from his wheelchair flies in the air and lands on you. Alternatively, if you save during the fight, and then wait a week, or change the internal settings of your console, then you come back to a cutscene of Naked Snake stumbling on the end's body. Yeah, he's already died, because it took you too long to beat him.
I'm surprised the game doesn't fucking demean you for that.
It does. Because there's a call with Naked Snake where he's like, I really wish I got the chance to go one-on-one with the legendary sniper.
Yeah, well, I fulfilled his wish. I think I'm gonna fulfill his wish most of the time whenever I go back to replaying this game, because I think it's more fair to do that for him, because he's just an old man who wants to fulfill his last dying wish.
It's like, yeah, you could beat Sniper Wolf the second time with Nikita missiles, but come on.
Yeah, right.
Beat her legitimately. She deserves it.
Yeah, that was a damn good boss fight. It was definitely the most interesting boss fight I've ever played in video games. I kind of wish more bosses did that, where they used their environment to their advantage, and the whole point is not so much of a headstrong fight as much as it is just like using the environment to your advantage and exploiting his old age and stuff.
Metal Gear Solid 4 and 5 do variants of the end battle. They're not as memorable, though.
Well, I'll give them credit for trying. So then the next boss fight, after, or at least the next Cobra unit, because what we forgot to mention up to this point, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, the bosses in Metal Gear Solid 3, primarily the ones that begin with the, are known as the Cobra unit. And they're this game's equivalent of the Foxhound and Dead Cell units from the previous Solid games. And while Dead Cell was not as good as Foxhound, the Cobra unit, with the exception of the end, primarily feel like just boss fights. That's it. We don't really get to know much about them beyond their gimmick, so to speak.
Yeah, this is when boss fights in Metal Gear Solid, in terms of storyline and actually being characters, started falling off a cliff.
I mean, it's not so bad here, because at the very least, there's the end, and I'll give Colonel Volgin that he has presence.
Oh yeah, in terms of mechanics, they're a lot of fun, but just in terms of story, yeah, the only ones that have an impression is Volgin, because he's the main villain, and the boss, because she's the fucking boss.
Yeah. I was talking about how in the MGS2 episode, I felt like Dead Cell was a step back from the Foxhound unit. Man, it makes me really miss Dead Cell. I never thought I'd fucking say that.
Yeah.
Because at least Dead Cell had, like, Fortune and fucking George Sears. See, I remembered his name.
What, you didn't like Bisexual Vampire or Fat Roller Skater?
I didn't mind Vamp. Fat Man, I was more interested in Peter Stillman and the lead up to it rather than Fat Man himself.
Fair. So on to the Fury.
Or as I like to call him, Heatwave from The Flash. He was an astronaut because he's in an astronaut uniform, but he also is a pyromaniac. And I think you compared this boss fight to Vulcan Raven from Metal Gear Solid 1, and like Vulcan, I struggled a bit with this fight. Not to the extent I did with Colonel Volgin, which I plan to rectify when I go back to Metal Gear Solid 1, but this fight was okay. I liked it more than the fear and the pain, but it wasn't as good as the end, but that's because this boss wasn't even trying to be the end.
And what sucks is that the voice actor, Richard Doyle, does a really good job. He's very talented. I wish he got a better role. Maybe in another game.
Yeah. This is also where I got to eat those bioluminescent mushrooms that recharge your batteries. We'll talk about that more when we talk about the supporting cast. So, from one comic book villain, we go to another. From Heatwave, we go to Electro with fucking Colonel Volgin. And this boss fight's weird because it took me a bit to realize how to do the CQC, because if you try to fight this guy head on, he'll be like, haha, bitch, you ain't shit. But then when you get behind him, he, like, becomes a bitch, and you can CQC his ass. And Ocelot fucking helps you, because Ocelot, you know, he has no loyalty beyond who he works for at the end of the day. But that's not the only fight we have with Colonel Volgin. He also takes a hold of the Shagohod, which is kind of like the Metal Gear equivalent of this game.
And not really, because it's more of a rival to Metal Gear technology.
It's a similar idea, at the least.
Sure, it launches nuclear weapons from any terrain, at least originally.
I love how Sig it's like, a bipedal walking tank? That's fucking awful, man. Like he was talking about how it's structurally bad. Oh, if only they listened. But no one listens to the black guy. So, Colonel Volgin takes a hold of the Shagohod.
Wait, speaking of which, so when you started Operation Snake Eater, you had the brilliant idea of putting on black face paint.
Aw, god damn it. God damn it, you gotta bring this up now.
And then a cutscene started, and you're like, oh fuck, Oh no. This is bad. This is really bad.
Yeah, I was like, oh no, dude. This is terrible.
And you know what's funny?
What?
I was reading Hideo Kojima's commentary for Metal Gear Solid 3, and apparently, Naked Snake was supposed to come in through the cutscene with black face paint already on.
Oh my god.
So, I'm guessing someone put him aside and was like, so, listen, Mr. Kojima.
Listen, Kojima-sama.
I understand that you meant no ill intent by this. However, you're making these games for a global audience, especially for a Western audience, that including America. These games are very big there. Well, you see, in American history, they have this thing called blackface, where white actors would put on stereotypically black makeup and perform humorous, exaggerated behaviors that are stereotyped to the African American community. And, it has a very dark history, so can you please, for the love of God, change Naked Snake's face camo in this cutscene?
Oh my god, that makes me feel even worse now! Okay, to anyone out there, I only put that on because it helped my stealth evasion. I didn't know a cutscene was coming up. And now knowing that, I am never putting that fucking thing on again. I don't care if it makes my camo meter go up by like 5 points. I'm not doing that again. Because seeing that shit in a cutscene made me go, eee, oh no, I don't want that.
Yeah, you're not like my friends who do that deliberately.
Oh my god. Look, I'm not a shitposter or an edgelord, okay? I am just a autistic male who is really stupid sometimes. Oh my god.
So again, in other words, you're not like my other friends.
Yeah, and I like to think of that as a fucking moral victory.
Fuck, I'm hiccuping now. So you were talking about Volgan?
Yeah, so he takes a hold of the Shagohod, and after a very cool, impressive sequence of Eva driving the motorcycle and you holding off his minions, you have to fight the Shagohod directly, and it took me a bit to realize how the boss fight worked, but when I did figure it out, I was like, okay, this dude is really pissed off now. So after I beat the Shagohod, Volgan comes out of the Shagohod, and he gets struck by a bolt of lightning. Done in by a bolt of lightning. A fitting end.
And if you hold down R1 while Eva hugs you, you can see the ghost of the Sorrow, implying that he's the one who did the killing blow. We forgot about the Sorrow, didn't we?
No. I didn't forget about him. I just wanted to kind of save him for a bit because he's not really a boss fight as much as it is like a really trippy sequence where you walk through this dreamlike pond and you get to see like all the victims you've killed. Like there were times where most of my victims were the result of accidentally killing them, trying to learn CQC, but there was the Cobra unit, and probably the funniest one was, and you told me to do this, was to kill someone on the mountains, wait for a vulture to come, kill the vulture, and then eat the vulture. You fucking sicko.
And the guy keeps saying, "You ate me, you ate me, you ate me."
Yeah, and then after a while, you get to the Sorrow's body, and then you die. But what I didn't know, because I never used the revival dead pills in my playthrough, I didn't know that you had to revive yourself. So I ended up pressing continue at the Snake is Dead screen, and I had to do all that again. Fortunately, because I didn't kill a lot of people, it was a very short journey, but I imagine if you killed more people, like if you were just a fucking killer, this section would be really long, and not knowing about that and doing it again would have to be the biggest bitch ever.
Yeah, even though this game is a lot more accommodating for an action playstyle, when you get to the Sorrow, it really fucks you up if you do that.
Besides, I find it more satisfying to not kill people in Metal Gear. Leave them none the wiser. And even if they do catch me, unless I absolutely need to kill, I try my best not to kill. I don't care if these games tell me these characters enjoy the killing. I'm trying to fight back against their most violent urges, because that's not who these characters are.
Aww.
Yeah, I like to be authentic in my fucking video games.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. Unfortunately for Big Boss, that kind of goes down to hell, but...
Mm-hmm. We'll get to that.
Yeah. But then we get to the last boss of the game, the boss, which is the other boss fight I really liked. Because you're in this, like, white flower field, and it's basically the end of the game. Like, this is the last thing you have to do, because you're given 2 objectives. Save Sokolov, and defeat the Cobra unit, including the boss. And this fight, primarily, if you know CQC enough to have mastered it, this boss, I imagine, is pretty damn intense. I only got to counter her through CQC once, because the timing is a bit tricky. So most of my method was to hide in the flowers, wait for her to run up to me, then trank her, and then get away from her, hide in a tree, and then repeat the process. But about 5 minutes into the fight, because this fight has a 10-minute time limit, the Snake Eater theme starts playing. And I was almost done with the fight by then, so I was like, oh shit. So, in-universe, I imagine, like, Naked Snake, like, him and the boss are on relatively even ground, and suddenly the theme starts playing. But I didn't let the timer run out, so what happens if the timer runs out? Do you just fucking die?
MiGs come down and nuke the fuck out of everything. Which, of course, DSP got. And there are comments saying, oh, I didn't even know this cutscene existed until I watched this playthrough.
Wow.
I only ran out of time once.
Was that on your first run, or just to see what would happen?
I think it was like subsequent playthroughs. I was trying to get a CQC-only run on Extreme. Extreme.
This is an extreme stealth game. By the way, the fucking Snake Eater theme is a goddamn banger.
I give my life, not for honor, but for you. Come on, Hub, join in.
Well,
in my time.
I've already climbed the ladder. I'm not doing it again.
Oh yeah, that's the real hardest boss in the game, the ladder.
Yeah, I was like, holy shit, how long is this goddamn ladder?
In Metal Gear Solid 2, a bridge, when Raiden and Emma climbed down the ladder to strut L, Lord Quadros edited in the backwards Snake Eater theme because they're climbing down instead of up.
The snake eats you. Yeah.
So, overall, in terms of gameplay, what do you think about Snake Eater?
I've mentioned this earlier, but I think this is, in terms of gameplay, my favorite game of the series so far. Because it's the most involved, I'd say, because not only do you have to worry about sneaking past guards, you also have to worry about if you're sneaking into your environment through the camo system. You have to make sure Naked Snake gets a good diet, don't eat the bats, or you'll get COVID. And you have to make sure he doesn't have any serious injuries. Like I mentioned, I was actually kind of intimidated before playing this game because I thought it would be really, really complex. A bit too complex, but once I started playing, it was pretty easy to figure out.
And another nice thing is that the game sticks to its core mechanics pretty much all throughout its playtime. Like, the problem with the Solid Snake era games, including MGS2, is, yeah, they start out as great stealth games, but then you get towards the end and they start switching more towards set pieces and puzzles.
I always think of the Solidus versus Raiden fight at the end of Metal Gear Solid 2, where you only use the sword, like, in one area before, and you barely got time to really get accustomed to it, but now you suddenly have to do this Star Wars prequel-esque duel fight, and it just kind of threw me for a loop the first time I played.
I was thinking more stuff like when you rappel down the communications tower in MGS1.
Oh yeah. If I had a rope I could go out here, maybe I could use that rope I got.
Metal Gear Solid 3 still has set pieces, but there aren't as many and they're spread out more, I feel. So you get a better bite of that core gameplay.
Oh yeah, like, I ate a ton of pythons in my playthrough, which Snake says, I could go for seconds. And I love his fucking commentary on what he eats. Like, if he doesn't like it, he'll say something like, I've had enough, or, this is horrible. But if he really likes it, he'll say something like, I want some more, or, that's damn good. But if it's something lukewarm, he's like, what can I say? or not too bad.
And the Russian rations are always terrible, and I never realized this until you started playing it, and I started thinking about it. Sokolov mentioned that the reason Khrushchev is being opposed is because of his failed agricultural policies. So that explains why the Russian rations are such shit.
I mean, they recover a decent amount of stamina, but that doesn't make the food any better.
And that, my friends, is why communism is a failure.
No, but capitalism. That's a different debate that I don't want to fucking talk about right now. So, there's the cure thing, which is pretty self-explanatory. Snake gets an injury, you fix him. He has a 3rd-degree burn, you put some ointment on it. But you also have to put a bandage on that shit, because, as we all know, putting a bandage on something instantly makes it better.
Well, at least it makes a little more sense than recovering from bullet wounds through shitty military rations.
True. Although, after I finished the game, I watched a video called Metal Gear Solid 3, every type of plant and animal you can eat, and there was a lot of things I didn't eat. And a lot of conversations between paramedic that I didn't get, and some of them were really fucking funny. I think my favorite was the Spatza one, where you fall asleep, and I think I like how Naked Steak doesn't understand the pronunciation. Va? Spatza. Spatza. And then when he eats like a poison mushroom, he's like, it was a poison mushroom. And then Snake shrunk about 2 feet.
Wait, what?
It's a Mario joke.
Oh.
Because poison mushrooms,
I know.
I made a joke about how it must have been funny if Kojima tried all this shit, but you told me, nah man, that's stupid. He had researchers to help him.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he had a sample of everything, and then Naked Snake's thoughts were his actual thoughts.
You're telling me Kojima ate a poisoned dart frog?
He is dedicated to his work, so maybe.
Okay, well, I hope he didn't actually do that. One piece of advice you gave me whenever I visited Russian stations was to blow up their food supply with TNT. And when you come back to the area, you'll hear the guards saying stuff like, I'm famished, and I haven't eaten in so long. So if your food gets rotten, or if you're like me and had a poisoned dart frog on standpoint, you can throw the food. Obviously, you have to be out of sight. But when you throw the food, they'll notice it, and then they'll either get sick or die. And it was fucking hilarious seeing that shit happen.
I love it. I love the little details in this game.
Food! Glorious food! Oh, God!
Alright, I think we've said everything we can say about the gameplay.
Yeah.
Now on to the story. So, as I've said before, every Metal Gear game has a central theme that permeates throughout the narrative. This is Hideo Kojima explaining this. MGS has an anti-war, anti-nuke message throughout the series, but its main theme has always been what we should, and ultimately do, pass on to future generations. MGS1 talks about genes, and in MGS2 you have memes, or the information that isn't encoded into our genes. Originally, that was going to be the entire scope of the theme, but when we decided to do Metal Gear Solid 3, I thought about exactly what it is we should pass on. Even if you want to pass on the right memes, the criteria for selecting those memes changes with the times. For instance, in the Heine period, women with jowls were considered beautiful, but that isn't the case nowadays, is it? I set the game in the past in order to examine that selection process. End quote. And so Metal Gear Solid 3's theme is scene, or how the times we live in affect people's lives.
Yeah, because this is taking place during the Cold War, and they specifically mentioned the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah, they had this whole thing where the whole thing about the US government getting rid of their missiles in Turkey being part of the agreement was a cover story to hide the fact that they gave up Sokolov back to the Soviets. And what blew me away was when I was taking a Cold War class and learned about the Cuban Missile Crisis, it turned out that they actually were wanting to get rid of those nuclear sites in Turkey. So it wasn't just a thing Kojima made up in order to make his story work. Now, obviously, the stuff about Sokolov was made up, but...
I was really hoping you'd say, where the hell is Sokolov in class? And people would look at you like, what the fuck is wrong with this dumbass?
There's a contingent of Metal Gear fans who, coming out of Metal Gear Solid 2, were disappointed by how seemingly shallow Snake Eater was by comparison. What's your opinion on that?
When I initially finished the game, I kind of had similar sentiments. Because one of the reasons why I love Metal Gear Solid 2 as much as I did was because the story had layers upon layers upon layers of themes, metaphors, all that shit. And I thought it was really captivating that they were able to make it all work in 2001 when Metal Gear Solid 2's themes today are especially relevant. So when Snake Eater came and it was simpler by comparison, I was initially a little bit disappointed by that. But I think during our conversation and even afterwards, I was reflecting on the game's story and I thought, well, just because a game's story, or really a story in general, has layers upon layers doesn't make a story good. And in fact, as I was thinking about Snake Eater's approach to its story, I immediately noticed that by comparison to MGS2, this game's story is much more accessible because you don't really need to know anything about the Metal Gear Saga story to get into Snake Eater, whereas with Metal Gear Solid 2, you have to know about Metal Gear Solid 1. I would argue you need to know about Metal Gear 2 at least, with the whole Zanzibar Land war orphan stuff and how that affected Raiden, or at least for him being a war orphan. And that makes Metal Gear Solid 2 less accessible because you have to do extra homework in order to fully understand that game. And Snake Eater's story being simpler by design, I think, is another advantage because you can focus more on telling your story in, the moment, as opposed to Metal Gear Solid 2, which was built off the previous games up to that point, while also telling its own story.
Snake Eater focused a lot more on the characters than the intricacies and conspiracies of the plot. That's not to say past games didn't have a lot of emphasis on character. God no, as we talked about, the Foxhound unit is fucking incredible in terms of characterization and depth. But Snake Eater's story, being so easy to follow, allows that stuff to be more in the forefront.
Yeah, especially when it comes to our central characters of Naked Snake, Eva, Ocelot, and the boss.
You want to talk about Naked Snake now?
Yes.
So going into Metal Gear Solid 3, what were your initial impressions of Naked Snake?
Well, he's significantly more retarded than Solid Snake, because he has to fucking ask about everything.
Well, come on, Solid Snake says, "Ahind D," and shit like that all the time.
But I feel like it's more prevalent with Naked Snake.
A surveillance camera?
A surveillance camera? And no, there are no surveillance cameras in this game. Thank God, because I fucking hated the surveillance cameras.
I mean, he does seem more childlike.
Yeah, I love how when he first meets Eva, Eva's in her underwear, and yeah, you can focus on that, but Naked Snake is talking about the intricacies of a fucking gun. And I'm like, this guy is a fucking nerd. Which is something I can't say about Solid Snake.
Yeah, after Metal Gear Solid 2, Kojima took note of all the people complaining about Raiden. And so he made Naked Snake the man who would become Big Boss. Kind of a dude bro. He's obsessed with guns, and he's kind of slow when it comes to subtlety. There's a call with Eva where he's like, wait, how come Rykov has Colonel class access when he's only a major? And Eva's like, you're asking that even after seeing that picture where they lovingly gaze into each other's eyes? And Snake still doesn't get it, and Eva's like, I gotta go.
This motherfucker is gay!
And the boss even says that Jack, Naked Snake, isn't coming with the Cobra unit because he's still a child. He hasn't found an emotion to carry into battle. The boss is essentially Naked Snake's spiritual mother figure, and so this game kind of infantilizes him.
Yeah, that actually kind of threw me for a loop because all I knew about Big Boss was that he was the guy who was talking about, the never-ending war stuff that he wanted to carry out. I didn't know he started off as this fucking marshmallow.
We all gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, it's like how Vader was initially a kid on Tatooine who was about pod racing.
Yippee!
Yeah, exactly.
How do you compare him to Solid Snake?
Well, Solid Snake is a bit more, at least from the offset, Solid Snake is a bit more fatalistic initially, but, we learn that he becomes more optimistic as the series goes on. His speech with Raiden at the end of Metal Gear Solid 2, I think, is evident of that. Whereas Naked Snake is the opposite. He starts off more idealistic, and then he starts to go into more fatalistic philosophies. Hell, one of the things the boss told Snake before their final fight was about a very same sentiment Big Boss shared in his speech to Solid Snake in Metal Gear 2 about the never-ending war stuff.
She says, the winner of the battle will inherit the title of boss, and will carry out the rest of their days as a soldier. Which is very similar to what Big Boss told Solid Snake in Metal Gear 2. Except whereas I think the boss was trying to warn Naked Snake, Big Boss was cursing Solid Snake to that life.
Yeah, and you can see that with how they both start out. Like, if anything, Snake is trying to prove Big Boss's beliefs wrong.
Yeah, that's why he tries to help Raiden overcome his trauma as a child soldier, not be defined by it. He doesn't have to be Jack the Ripper. If he doesn't want to be, he can start over with his family, find a new name for himself. Fuck Rising. So there's a recent post on the Metal Gear Solid subreddit that it has some comments that I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on.
Okay.
So the post was about asking people if they liked Solid Snake or Big Boss. Here's a quote. You have to keep in mind that Solid Snake is not a real human. On the other hand, Big Boss is a real human being with true emotions. He can be more expressive than Solid Snake. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know, man. I think Solid Snake is pretty damn expressive.
How so?
Like, because he's fucking trying to help Raiden out here. And if he's quote-unquote not a real human, i.e. not having human emotions, then why the hell would he help Raiden or Otacon and stuff like that? Why would he care personally about Meryl in Metal Gear Solid 1? Why would he care about Frank Yeager and what he had to say? Why would he fucking quote his last words in Metal Gear Solid 2 from Metal Gear Solid 1? I don't know, I think this person is thinking of the mindset of, well, he's technically not a real human, so he can't have emotions. Like, no, that's not how this works, dude.
Hub?
What?
I completely lied to you. That was not a Reddit comment. That was actually something said by Hideo Kojima in 2013, advertising Ground Zeroes.
What?
Yeah.
What?
I know.
You fucking bamboozled me!
So, what are your thoughts now that you know that those words that you criticized were from the Word of God himself?
Well, this isn't the first time I've heard a creator of a franchise misunderstand the work that he created. I mean, granted, to be fair, we're all human, we make mistakes and all that, but I feel like that's very contradictory to what we've seen up to this point.
I was fucking devastated when I read that interview. I was like, oh no, Kojima became a Big Boss fanboy. God damn it.
Oof.
It was like everything I loved and cared about this series was a lie this entire time.
A beautiful lie, but a lie nonetheless.
It hurt me enough for me to, swear off Metal Gear for a long time.
Wow.
Yeah, it fucking hurt me, man. Now, over time, I thought about it and read some other quotes from Kojima, and I think I understand what he's trying to say a little more.
What do you think he's trying to say?
Well, here's something from the Metal Gear Solid 3 commentary. There's some English here, so bear that in mind. The human-made clones, Solid Snake and Liquid Snake, is like the story of Frankenstein, of man-made man, not a living creature that happened in the world naturally, a man-made monster, and that's Solid Snake. On a character perspective, Naked Snake is more full of human feel to him. Like I said, English.
Mm-hmm.
At the time of the Snake Eater mission, he's still too pure, like the boss said, still filled with the sense of justice. We made his movements and actions, his dialogue and the voice portrayal, more human-like, as compared to Solid Snake. He's more sensitive to feelings and pain. Solid Snake is not like that. He is a created monster. Feelings are against his character and personality. He just follows orders. There is this kind of difference in character between the two of them. Now notice he says that Big Boss is like this at the time of Operation Snake Eater.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like he's talking about both characters when they initially started out. So, Big Boss starts out more human and open and idealistic. He sees himself as an American patriot. He believes in his country, its values. Solid Snake, when we're introduced to him for the third time in Metal Gear Solid 1, he's a lot more cynical and keeps people at arm's length. He's a lot more bitter and disillusioned about the world around him. And just like how Big Boss slowly became less human, he became more cynical, more fatalistic, Solid Snake has the opposite arc, where he regains more faith in humanity. He reaches out more and starts making more connections with other people. The man who ends up being his best friend is an anime tech nerd who pissed himself when they first met.
It sounds like what Kojima is saying is the same stuff I just talked about.
Yeah, and another thing is, Kojima has enthusiastically endorsed Project Ito's novelization of Metal Gear Solid 4. It's Solid Snake's final mission as told from Otacon. And I think that really nails Solid Snake to a T. And so back when I was disillusioned with Metal Gear, reading Project Ito's novelization, knowing that Kojima endorsed it and saw Project Ito as kind of like a successor, did a lot to bring me back into the Metal Gear fold, if you will. I was honestly not going to buy Ground Zeroes until I read that novelization and was like, okay, maybe there's something else to what Kojima's saying. Maybe there's more to what Kojima is thinking than he had time to convey in this marketing event for Ground Zeroes. So in essence, Solid Snake's story is about a man-made monster growing to become more human, whereas Big Boss is a story about a natural-born human being slowly becoming a monster.
That is goddamn tragic.
And the impetus for how Big Boss becomes a monster is he has to kill his spiritual mother, the boss. What do you think about the boss as a character?
I honestly don't know what to really say, because it's pretty damn clear throughout the game that she's like this super tough leader. She developed CQC alongside Naked Snake, but it seemed like no matter what we did, she always had, the upper hand somehow. It was like, we knew we had to fight her, and, the further we got and the more experienced we got, the more we're like, oh, we're slowly catching up to her. Because at first, it's like, him beating her? That's impossible. But throughout the game, through your experiences, it's like, oh, maybe I can beat the boss.
To the point where you even get a black version of her sneaking suit.
Yeah.
So there's this dichotomy between, pure white and dark blackness.
Oh, hey, look, it's Rey and Kylo Ren from The Rise of Skywalker.
Vernon gets so many pissed off comments. What? You enjoy something that internet edgelords say is bad?
To hell with you!
So the message that the boss tries to pass down to Naked Snake is that Snake wants to learn how to be a soldier. He wants to be a great soldier. But the boss is trying to make Snake understand that when you're a soldier, you have nothing to believe in except the mission. And the mission is given by those in power. And those in power change along with the times. So people in power yesterday might have one thing as their objective, but then those in power coming in tomorrow can have a different or even opposing objective. And no matter what, soldiers just have to play along with it. Like back during World War II, the US was allies with the Soviet Union. After World War II ended, the Soviet Union became America's enemy. And at the time the game was released, as the boss noted, America and Russia were actually on pretty okay terms. Of course, playing the game now, what the boss says doesn't have the same weight anymore because, yeah, they're still fucking enemies if you play it in 2021. But at the same time, that does still prove the boss's point about how whether or not a country is an enemy or friend flip-flops along with the times. So ultimately, what the boss wants people to understand is that she went up in space and she saw that the world has no borders. So the geopolitics that we squabble over only really exists in our heads. It's something that we all just accept, even if there's no physical proof that it exists or that we should adhere to it.
Hey man, we live on the same planet. Let's be all good with each other.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, there's that scene with Johnny's grandfather, who's also named Johnny, but this is when Snake is in that prison cell.
All the firstborns are named Johnny.
Yeah, and Snake, an American agent, and Johnny Sr., a GRU Soviet soldier, they have this nice bonding moment. And Johnny thinks about how, they're able to be friendly with each other, but their countries aren't. Which is part of the game's themes about how countries tear people apart. It tore Snake and the boss apart. Politics robs us of our humanity and individuality.
I mean, well, you see, it's because they're just two people on two different sides. War's no reason to end the friendship.
Exactly! That's why I thought it was so interesting in playing Metal Gear Solid 3 first, then MGS1. Because even though the games take place decades apart and star two different characters, I still saw parallels between what each Snake was going through. Naked Snake had the boss, Solid Snake had Gray Fox. They both had to kill their close friends because they were both on opposite sides of a political conflict. That really blew me away when I played MGS1.
This is all part of this S3 program.
There's all these warmongers in Congress who keep trying to get us into different wars with other countries because X and Y leaders did something bad. But it's like, okay, but they don't really have anything to do with us. Like during the Gulf War, Saddam Hussein was invading Kuwait, so President George H.W. Bush declared war on Iraq in order to push back Saddam's invasion of Kuwait. And what ended up happening was Saddam Hussein was fine during this war. The people who got hurt were your average Iraqi citizens who got drafted in this military. And of course, Bill Clinton's Secretary of State, Madeline Albright, declared sanctions on Iraq, which starved 500,000 children, more children than Hiroshima. And when asked about this on 60 Minutes, she said, "Oh yeah, the price is worth it. Because we don't like the leader of a country, it's okay to starve 500,000 children." This is what happens when you define your morality based on nations and the whims of politics. You convince yourself into accepting the most horrible, heinous crimes imaginable. So even though this game isn't as complicated as Metal Gear Solid 2, I still think the message it's trying to convey is nevertheless very important. To snap normies out of their blind loyalty to their country that they've been brainwashed by public education into believing.
There's a reason I stopped standing up for the Pledge of Allegiance after a while.
Based
in wokeness. Yeah, so even though I prefer Metal Gear Solid 2's story just on the basis of that game personally hit me harder with its themes and its characters, I still think Metal Gear Solid 3's story was very well told. It was very well told. It was a very strong character story. I honestly, despite the monster he'll later become, I felt bad for Big Boss when he's walking on that gravesite, with the message from Eva still playing. And she says, future generations will know her as a traitor, an unredeemable monster, but she was a true patriot, and he, salutes her.
Yeah, throughout the game you thought that the boss defected to the Soviet Union, but then, at the end of the game, Eva explains the boss's true mission, which was, initially it was to retrieve the Philosopher's Legacy. The Philosopher's was a proto-patriots.
The OG Patriots.
Right, it was comprised by the US, China, and Russia, which would become the Soviet Union. But then after World War II, they divided up, and what remained was the Philosopher's Legacy, which Volgan's dad stole. The US government wanted that money back for themselves. So they sent the boss in, pretending to defect, but then Volgan fucked things up by firing a Davy Crockett nuclear missile on Soviet territory. So now, in order to prove the US government's innocence, they had to send in Naked Snake to kill his spiritual mother. And so, they give him all these accolades. They give him the title of Big Boss to show that he has surpassed the boss. But, looking at his face, you can tell he's disgusted by everyone in that room. Like, this person was the most loyal soldier you had, and you threw her away like garbage. And that is why Big Boss doesn't like grown-ups, because they forced him to kill his mother, essentially.
What? I just didn't like that Adam Sandler movie. But yeah, it is no less tragic of what he just fucking did. And if I were in his position, I would be just as disgusted, because he doesn't shake anyone's hands. Not even like his support unit who help him throughout the game. He's just like, fuck you guys. You're all idiots.
And he made an explicit point not to shake the hand of the director of Central Intelligence who had planned Operation Snake Eater from the beginning, because his true loyalty is no longer with the US government, it's to the boss and his idea of what she wanted, which was a military nation where soldiers fight for themselves, not at the whims of politics.
And that is how I got the idea for Outer Heaven.
Yep.
Yeah, so, good story, good characterization. Still really fucked what Big Boss had to go through, but it was no less sentimental.
You got anything else to say about the other characters?
Yeah, I missed a lot of conversations with Paramedic, who, she's your save character, and she likes to talk about movies a lot, and the first one she brought up was Godzilla King of the Monsters, which, to get a bit spurry here, was the Americanized version of the original 1954 Gojira, and I remember at the time going, no, that's the American version of Godzilla. Not the 98 one, but whatever. But she recommends all other kinds of movies, some of which I've heard of, some of which I have not.
Well, luckily, Paramedic recommends that Snake watches the original version of Godzilla.
Yeah, but I just wanted to share that experience.
Right.
But she recommends all kinds of movies, you know, some of which I've heard from Cinemassacre through, like, Monster Madness and other reviews, some of which I've never heard of.
And Naked Snake is like, oh, this all sounds ridiculous. This will never work in real life. He's like a YouTube film bro before YouTube film bros were a thing.
Why Spider-Man Far From Home is objectively bad. Like that, those kinds of people. He was Cinema Sins before Cinema Sins.
And Paramedic is like, Snake, it's people like you who ruin all the fun in movies. And I think that was a jab at people who are bitching about Vamp being immortal and other crazy shit that happens in MGS 1 and 2.
I'm surprised that none of the bosses, Naked Snake goes, what? You shoot bees out of your stomach? What the hell is this dog shit? There's Sigid, who's kind of like our weapons expert. Not much to really say about him.
You gravely offended him when he wore that blackface.
God damn it! I didn't know a cutscene was gonna fucking show up. Okay? I didn't mean to disgrace his people. Okay? Like, no disrespect to him whatsoever. The only noteworthy thing of, besides that mistake was him bringing up that, what? A bipedal tank that has legs? That's structurally disadvantageous. Well, it didn't stop other Metal Gears from having legs.
There's also that call where Naked Snake has a revelation about how amazing it is to be inside of a box.
Yeah.
What do you think about Major Zero?
Well, he goes by the name of Tom during the Virtuous mission, but then he mentions that he watched the movie called The Great Escape, and there were 3 tunnels that would lead the people in the prison out. He thought Tom was the tunnel that led them out. No, I forget which tunnel it was, but he kind of thought of it as like some, bad omen. So he decides to change his name from Tom to Major Zero.
And then he tells Snake that the passcode for identifying Adam is Who Are the Patriots and Lolly Lule Lo.
Not the Lolly Lule Lo!
Okay, again, Metal Gear Solid 3 was my first game in the series that I played, so I just thought, this game's being weird again. Then I played Metal Gear Solid 2 and I hear Scott Dolph say, the Lolly Lule Lo? That's impossible. And I was like, wait, what? That was important?
Shocking revelation.
Yeah!
That must have blown your mind.
Fuck yeah, it did. I was like, wait. How did Zero know about the Patriots' code name? Or, pseudonym name?
Big think. Yeah.
There's a call with Paramedic where she talks about cloning and how Big Boss's genes will become a valuable commodity in the future. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
God damn it, I already hate this clone saga. One conversation I did really like was, if you eat the bioluminescent mushroom, which recharges your batteries for things like your mine detector, thermal goggles, night vision goggles, etc. You can call paramedic, to which Naked Snake would comment how they recharge his batteries, to which she's just like, what? So she leaves, and she's like, you can overhear her talking to Sigget, and they're like, maybe it's all up in his mind. Yes, Snake, eating bioluminescent mushrooms recharges your batteries. So, this motherfucker will question logic in movies, but he won't question that. You son of a bitch.
So we got the radio context out of the way. What do you think about Ocelot?
I found it interesting seeing, like, a younger Ocelot. Like, fuck, this guy goes this far back? Like, shit.
I remember when I first played MGS3, I was like, God, I hate this arrogant little prick. And when the game ended, I was like, I hope I never see this asshole ever again. Turns out he's in every game.
I'm sure when you played Metal Gear Solid 1, you're like, what?
I read the manual and I was like, God fucking damn it. Because the manual for MGS1 had Shinkawa portraits of all the characters and little biographies.
This was back when video game manuals existed.
This is back when video games were fun.
Well, on that cocky little shit thing, that's what happens when you get a Spider-Man, or in this case, a future Spider-Man, to play a character.
What do you think about him and Big Boss?
It's kind of interesting because he ends up wanting to know more about this foe who keeps, eluding him. It's almost kind of like the game's rivalry in a sense. There was a conversation where, after I stocked up a ton of food, like calorie mates and stuff like that, when I met up with Eva and got all my equipment back, I noticed, wait a minute, all my food's gone. Eva, did you eat all that shit, you dirty whore? But it turns out, no, Ocelot ate that shit. I'm like, that son of a bitch. But then I realized who his mother was. It's not directly stated, but it is more or less heavily implied, if not outright confirmed, that his mother is the boss. And who's the daddy? Well, it's the Sorrow. I was like, what the fuck? For context, the boss gave birth on the battlefield and had her baby taken from her, so she never got to meet her baby, and Ocelot never got to well, no, he did get to meet his mother, he just never knew.
As far as we know, he never knew.
Yeah.
And I don't think she knew either. Now, what sucks is you have to really dig into the radio with Eva in order to get that specific call. Like, you have to exit and re-enter the radio menu a bunch of times and call Eva in order to get that fucking call. Otherwise, she'll just say, if it's completely dark in there, if it's completely dark in there, if it's completely dark in there, just give me the call about Ocelot. This is important plot information. So, Hub, what are your final thoughts on Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater?
I would like more snakes to eat. But, for real though, I really, really liked this game. Out of all the games so far, this is the only one where, after I beat it, I had the urge to play it again to see how much better I got. I didn't have that same feeling towards the other games so far, not even Metal Gear Solid 2. But because of Snake Eater's gameplay, part of me was like, maybe before this podcast I could sneak a second playthrough in. Maybe. Because I wanted to see how much better I got with the game. Because by the end of the game, I felt like I had a good understanding of the mechanics.
If you want, the opposite of DSP, I recommend watching James Howell's Foxhound Emblem playthrough of Metal Gear Solid 3.
Is it incredible?
Oh yeah, he has that game down to a fucking science. And it's the closest to an analysis he's ever done of that game, unfortunately. He did that incredible analysis of Metal Gear Solid 2, and one for 4, which we're going to get into soon, but yeah, for 3, he just kind of skipped out on that one. I guess there was something that really compelled him.
He liked the game enough to be able to get the Foxhound emblem.
Sure.
Even though I personally like Metal Gear Solid 2's story more, I still found Snake Eater's story to be very good. I don't think there's any story in this series so far that I've disliked. I may have not entirely been enthusiastic about how it's told, but as far as the stories themselves are concerned, they're all very good. I think my perfect Metal Gear game for me would have the layered plot of Metal Gear Solid 2, but have the gameplay intricacies of Metal Gear Solid 3. That would be, in my opinion, the perfect Metal Gear game for me. But yeah, great game. Probably my second favorite of the series so far. Again, strongest on the gameplay department, but Metal Gear Solid 2 story is still my favorite. I'd have to really think about which game I ended up liking more, because it's really hard, as I started thinking, like, which one do I like more, 2 or 3? And I'm like, fuck, that's hard. I'd have to really sit on that.
Like, the fact that you're having that debate just makes me so happy that you give enough of a shit to want to have an opinion.
Yes, MGS3 is in fact good. Play it.
And thus concludes our discussion of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Coming up next on Autism Exchange is the big one.
The one that you have been hyping up since the beginning.
This is the Avengers Endgame of Metal Gear. This is the grand finale. Like, once I beat Metal Gear Solid 3, I knew that I needed to get a PS3 so I can finish this amazing story. And so, it was the game I thought about every goddamn day. It's the only time I was this excited for a game that was already released. Yeah, like, by the time I played MGS4, it was Christmas of 2009, so about a year and a half after it was released.
Wow.
So yeah, I was fucking hyped out of my goddamn mind with this game. When I opened up my PS3, I was like, okay, I got the box to play it. Now where's the thing that matters?
Oh my god, you got me that Metal Gear Solid 4 I want! And it's the Twin Sticks. Is that Simpsons meme? It's just like Marge smiling because she got Bart the wrong game. Given the way you talk about this game and the fandom's reaction to it, it feels less like Avengers Endgame and more like The Rise of Skywalker, where it's completely divisive. Granted, for The Rise of Skywalker, I feel like that movie is divisive for dumb reasons. I don't know about Metal Gear Solid 4 because I have not played the game.
Well, just to put you in the right frame of reference for the game, here's something Kojima said prior to the game's release. Once again, I had intended for MGS3 to wrap up the series, but so many people wanted to know what happened after 2. Things like the identity of the Patriots and so forth. I had planned on leaving those mysteries as mysteries, but people weren't convinced that the series was wrapped up, so ultimately we ended up making 4. When work started on it, though, I began to wonder if my message of what we should pass on to future generations had truly gone through, both to players and my team. After all, I've been conscious of the fact that this really is going to be my final Metal Gear. Haha. Which means the team is going to have to continue the series themselves after I step away. However, it hit me that maybe there are some things you can't pass on. A person's will, thoughts, and emotions aren't encoded in their genes, and they aren't a part of memes either. If you group together those remaining factors, you're left with a person's sense, and that's the theme of the game this time around. So in other words, after the backlash of Metal Gear Solid 2, Kojima started to wonder if maybe the reason people weren't receptive to his message is that he didn't have the same sense as he did. Like, something got lost in translation as his point was transmitted from the game to the player, or his work to his team.
Or maybe it's that meme template of someone completely missing the point of the message going, oh cool, robot.
In some ways, that actually is Metal Gear Solid 4's sense theme in a nutshell.
Maybe it's the fault of retards not understanding the franchises they like and just wanting cool shit without anything else to really go with it. Like, yeah, I love cool shit too, but I also like there to be a bit more than just cool shit.
There's a variant of that meme where the boss is like, the philosophers are perpetuating war in order to grow their power. Also, soldiers are used and abused by their countries. And so that point goes over Naked Snake's head, and he goes, soldiers are being used and abused by their countries. So I'll create my own nation, where we create constant war, where soldiers will always have a place.
Call it Outer Heaven. What do you think? Is that a good name? I don't know, I kinda like Zanzibar Land more. Shut up, that's a stupid name.
And with that, you've been listening to Autism Exchange, the show where two Aspies share the things they're obsessed with. I'm Forcewave.
And I'm HubPie, and Autism Exchanging is just another part of the average life of an Aspie.
Have a nice day.
Catch you later.